Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming. This event is a panel discussion called Educators Ready for the Metaverse, where we'll be talking about what stops educators from implementing XR technologies on a daily basis and what can be done to help XR education evolve in its best. It's about all the educators in the Universal Experience with Language Team Conference, which is taking place today and tomorrow, featuring expert educators, researchers, instructional designers, world builders, and more to explore the potential for learning languages in XR. Where the educators in the language project team. Our project explores learning languages and art of language in the virtual learning environment. We host regular meetups, workshops, special events, and conferences on the use of spatial technology in language education and training. Amani and I are the leaders of this team project. Amani Al-Hayat is an educator, researcher, voice user interface designer, author, and teacher trainer. She's currently pursuing her doctoral degree in the instructional technology and media program at Teachers College, Columbia University. Her research interests include conversational IE, extended reality for education, immersive storytelling, intelligent NFTs, and decentralized autonomous organizations. I'm Ekaterina Semenyuk, known as a Ginger in Altspace, a teacher of English as a foreign language from Moscow, Russia. I have a background in foreign philology, the history and development of languages, and I used to learn 8 foreign languages. My professional experience includes working with foreign adult students in Sydney and with kids in the Moscow. Now let me introduce you our speakers. Dr. Angelina Dayton is the Chief Research Scientist at the Virtual World Society and an Aspen Institute Tech Policy Fellow. And Lauren Alva is a learning experience designer with Global Academy, learning designer at Meta, and educator for 15 years. Um, Thank you all so much for coming. It's a real pleasure to have you here at our panel. Thank you. Just a brief reminder to our audience. It's an interactive panel discussion, which means that you're very welcome to ask any questions to our panelists or give any commentaries or share your stories at any time. So there's a raise hand button in your lower right corner. Once you have something to say or ask, please click it and wait for us to unmute you and amplify your voice. Thanks. And let's start our discussion talking about the benefits of VR education. What do you think they are, the benefits?
You want to go first?
After you.
Okay. I'm in virtual reality education because the way that we first learn in the physical world is in 3D environments. And so when it's possible to continue learning in 3D environments, I think that's very beneficial. And while most of the time, all of us have been taught in schools, I think that brick and mortar building education is going to be going away by the end of this century and will be replaced by environments like this. And so this is the best way to duplicate physical world in 3D. And what I'm hoping is that we can learn to use this medium in a way that that best mirrors the way that we learn as children in the physical world. So that's a brief answer. I could talk more, but I pass it over to you now.
Yeah, I think, it's probably like things you would imagine. It allows us to be more active in our learning experience. It can put us into any kind of space. So I often think like when I was teaching English and you would have like textbooks, and at the beginning of the textbook chapter, it would say like, imagine you're next to a volcano in this completely different space. It's always like hard for learners to make connections to things, even if they're really great imagination, if they have really great imagination. So I love the potential of VR spaces like this to, make things a lot more closer, relatable. I also like the potential for creation. And, I really believe strongly in active learning. So I love the idea that learners come into a space and create something, that it's not so teacher centered. It can be very learner centered. And I like the idea of that.
And if I can just continue to build on what she said, I think that most of the time education used to be content consumption, and this medium really allows us to be content creators. I think that that's where education is going, and I really agree with everything that she said, that this medium then allows the learner to create the world that they live in and learn in, and I think that that's probably the best way to learn. And this before, content used to be static. It existed in a book in just one form, the written word printed on a page. But now content is not only fluid, dynamic in this medium, but it's also something that we can create as we move along. And so I just want to second everything she said.
Thank you. Do you have how could the metaverse be used to enhance or supplement existing foreign language educational content and activities? What do you think? By the way, Dr. Rodney is here. Could you please join us at the stage? Come here.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Good to
Let
be
me
here.
introduce
Thank you for
you.
inviting me.
Yes, thank you so much for coming. Dr. Basiyar Rodney is associate of the university and chair of the Dept of teacher education.
Well, again, thank you for having me. And just to kind of think about the questions that I just heard earlier about benefits of VR, I think, we're all learning, but I think the parts that stand out the most to me is that you can do things that you can't do in the real world. You can interact with things in ways that you couldn't in the real world. So like, dangerous objects, or deep immersion. You can't walk on the bottom of an ocean or a river or something like that in real life easily. So virtual reality opens up spaces like that in ways that you didn't have before.
Yeah, that's interesting. I just want to ask a question because I introduced the virtual reality at New York State TESOL, and I had a hard time, and I think Angelina can relate to that, Dr. Dayton. And so thinking of being the devil's advocate, like teachers are, overworked, and those who used to come to the session, they actually had assumptions about VR. Why should I use VR with my students? And so if you're going to introduce VR, AR to teachers, they have no idea, and they don't have time at the same time. So how would you introduce that to teachers, and how would you tell them about the benefits of virtual reality and augmented reality in the ESL classroom, which actually can scaffold learning and make learning meaningful?
I can start. I think maybe like a big barrier for teachers is that number one, they think they have to be an expert in ed tech or in like programming, or they need to be a gamer. So there's a kind of like image that VR has, and it needs to overcome that before teachers are going to buy into it. And then also too, like, I was a teacher, and our mind is often like, how much time is this going to take to lesson plan? How much time is this going to take to grade? So of course, talking through that process, but also offering a kind of framework. Because I think when I first started to get into VR for education, I was like thinking, how do I plan a lesson for this? Like, it's not the same, it's not the same as when you're in class. And so having some kind of structure or framework, or maybe you even say, teachers, you don't need to design lessons. You simply need to deliver lessons and facilitate, and you change the role of the teacher. So I think that's important. And then, yeah, you don't need to be an expert. Like, I wasn't an expert. I'm not an expert. I'm still learning. I couldn't possibly say that you're an expert at this so earlier in the game. So I think, too, showing up kind of vulnerability when you enter into VR space for education. Like, this is not something you just like become an expert at. So, yeah, those are probably the things I think are important initially to address.
I
Yeah,
agree.
any.
I agree with everything that you're saying. Oftentimes, teachers think they do need to be the experts, and I let them know that anything that they struggle with, that there's actually resources for them. And I think I really want to echo what you said about how lesson planning has to change, about how when you have static content, you can have a certain lesson plan, but when you have dynamic content, your lesson plan needs to change. And teachers are very interested in classroom management and control and knowing what's going to happen next. And dynamic mediums do not allow you to do that.
Interesting.
For sure.
Do you have any examples of VR language learning experiences that you or your students have designed or been involved in?
Again, like, I haven't done a lot of teaching. I'm just kind of exploring. So by no means am I saying something that's like, from a very high level of experience. But when trying to create like a lesson, I was, of course, thinking about an icebreaker. I think VR space might be a good place to, just to get to know each other, might kind of make people a little less tense. More comfortable to express themselves. So I thought, like, we were using Spatial, platform called Spatial, and in there you can pull out certain 3D objects into the space, put them in the space. And I thought, like, that might be a good way of kind of introducing yourself. How I pictured in my mind was like I would have learners pull out objects, like they could pull out a boombox, or they could pull out an instrument, or some kind of food or an animal, and they could use those objects to kind of tell about themselves. They would like place them as if they were in a museum, like they'd had their own museum and their little exhibit space in that museum, and they could put them on a pedestal. And then that could be a kind of conversation starter. Like, you could walk around and have certain learners ask each other questions, or if they don't, if you don't want to, if they're not comfortable like speaking, there was the option to also like pull out a little notepad, and you could write or type a question. So that was one idea. We also played around with the idea of like a scavenger hunt in a space for vocabulary. Like, you put words on a card, and these cards just kind of stay in the air, and you could place them all over the world, all over the environment. and the learners could go around the environment, explore it, pick it up, bring it somewhere, and then kind of categorize different words to create like circle and have them group words together. Something about that physical motion, I thought might be a good way to use that space, our learning environment. And just 2 ideas off the top of my head.
Yeah, wonderful.
Great examples. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I've just been doing like tours. So like most of my students, as the earlier we were talking about teachers, most of my students are becoming teachers or thinking they want to be teachers. And so over the last year or so, maybe 2, I've just been introducing them to VR, really with the help of Kat here. And what we've been doing is just kind of having them tour the worlds, see different things. It's really, really new to them. So I'm not surprised that teachers are kind of struggling because again, the idea that it's all about games. So you're kind of trying to break this box that they've built. So we've done tours, like we've gone to different parts of different worlds where we looked at, for example, a Japanese restaurant, so students can see how that space could be used for language learning. And it's funny because you go into some of these spaces and you meet other people, and those people kind of want to be friends, and so it's a good social space, and it's a safe space. Students feel relatively safe kind of moving around. So we do a lot of kind of discovery tours right now. And I'm kind of seeing it at 2 spectra, because on the one hand, it's my students, but I have some kids too, and my kids love the headset. So they're always running around trying to do something. And so we've been looking at different apps for like PE and physical education, not even deliberately, it's just what they like to do. So they like to put on the headset and, do some of the sports games and things like that. So those are kind of good ways to kind of induct them. And then I kind of sometimes hang out in the campfire and just meet people. I'm also a part of another community, which is a blockchain community, and they've been doing their annual conference in VR for the last 2 or 3 years. So that's also fun. There's a lot of fireside chats and presentations about blockchain and blockchain tech. I've been to a lot of conferences, so that's the kind of things I try to show my students. So they kind of see that it's a social space, it's a kind of third space where they can engage, and then move them to the level of hopefully learning and learning activities.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Dayton, do you have anything to add? Or
Dr. Dayton, you have this creative way of teaching language learning in VR. So can you tell us about it, Beat Saber and other stuff?
Yes,
Ooh.
I just want to make sure my mic was okay. Is it okay?
I think it's
Kind
a little
of.
hard to hear you. Yeah.
Yeah.
How about now? How about now?
Coming in and out. Coming in and out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm traveling, and so it's not very good. Oh shoot. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, sort of.
Yeah.
Little better.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I will pass on this question and work on my mic.
This one.
Yeah,
It's
we
good.
can.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
can
we
hear
can
That was
hear you now.
better, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, that was
Okay,
better.
good. Okay, great. One of the things that the other speaker spoke about was about feeling safe and having friends in these spaces. And if you think about language, it's only a medium to connect with other people. And so some of the creative ways of teaching language is really not setting up spaces to teach language, but setting up spaces where people connect. And then they want to tell you, how do you play Beat Saber? Or I love you, or tell me more about yourself. And I think that this medium allows us different opportunities to explore spaces where we can connect with other people and create the authentic conversations that students will then remember. And so Beat Saber is a great way for you to learn left and right in a language and different colors, and cheer on your classmates, which is, good job. It's one of the first words you learn. Good job. Or when they went to the petting zoo, they learned, some of the students in the Cherokee language class learned, "I'm afraid of that. It looks really big." Or "That's my favorite animal." So the expression that you have of yourself in a community is really the environments, and both of us, I think that that's right on in the direction we should be going. Hopefully, you guys heard everything I just said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We did.
I
We did.
agree. Yeah.
Thank you.
I was gonna
Great
say too
point.
that, like, it's those are good examples of how you don't have to like imagine VR for education as like having a lesson in VR. It could be that VR spaces become like a supplemental text. You read novels, you watch movies, you read articles. Maybe you give students the option to go and play a game in VR, to watch a 360, do some sort of 360 immersive experience. And then in the classroom, you use that as a point of discussion, or you use it for writing, or you use it for presentation or something like that. Like, I don't think there's one way to use VR for education. So depending, and this goes back to the first question, depending on the teacher or the curriculum designer's level of comfort, you can use it however much or little you do. And not just limited to VR. Also, AR is also an option. Augmented reality is also an option too.
Thank you. So we'll understand that VR is amazing and powerful learning tool. So why educators are still so shy about trying this technology? Is the technology itself already there, ready for them? What do you think?
Yeah,
I think
I
all of
think
us,
there's. Oh
I
yeah,
think,
sorry.
I
Please go
think
for it.
all of us early adopters in this room are all a bit fearless and maybe a little crazy. We can't expect everybody to jump into spaces that, uh, to failure. I think all of us are a little bit more comfortable with mistakes, and I think we should respect that other people are a little bit more scared of those type of situations. We have to ease them in a little bit more slowly. But go on, Lauren. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh no. Yeah, I totally agree. And I think there are a lot of like apps or platforms, tools out there, but that doesn't mean that they're inviting or welcoming. I've gone through some different apps that can be used, but they don't have great onboarding. Um, or they have onboarding and it's just really like cryptic, or not very new user friendly. So I think that's probably one thing too. How do you get training on that kind of thing? And if your institution doesn't offer it, it's on you to figure those things out. So unless you have some like support, you may not just jump into it. But I do think like an important thing is to actually, like, if you are trying to, get teacher buy-in, is to have them try it out. Like, you can talk about it up the wall, but there's nothing like actually experiencing it, like being immersed in it. So if you have the means of doing that, I would say that that's probably one of the initial steps.
Yeah, I would agree. I think one of the things we know about technology adoption in general, especially for teachers, the place where they learn to adopt it is in their training programs.
Yeah.
Usually in their teacher initial cert program, if you have one of those, or if they go to ed school or teachers college, and then if they don't learn it there, then there's professional development outside, and that's kind of tricky. So I think one of the reasons why people, educators may not be flocking to it is the technology itself is relatively new, right? We're still in the early stages, and people are still trying to figure out, where it belongs. People again think it has to do with gaming. So I think as we continue to do things like this and kind of amplify uh, the relevance and the need, then people will get to it. Now, I know it's a thoughtful question. I was just reading a Brookings report today about it, and one of the risky things is one of the things with technologies in the classrooms is if we don't get ahead of it now, if people like us who are educators and learning design people don't come together and start working on it, then lots of other technologies that went before, you just have it where they make all this hype and then after all the hype is over, people are like, well, we're not really using this. So I
Yeah.
think we're doing the right thing, which is to have these conversations now and kind of seed the environment and try to move ahead of the pure commercialization of the technology. But I think, it's communities like this that's going to really push it out. Because I can tell you, most of, whether it's my colleagues who are teachers and instructors and professors or students, that's not really the thing that grabs them. So I think we have to
Yeah.
keep opening up the spaces. That knowledge is still new for people.
Yeah. Totally.
I
And I
also
think to the
talk a
other half
Well
of
little.
the
said.
question,
Mm-hmm.
uh, the other half of the question was, do you think we're educators are ready? And I'd say no. I think COVID taught us that there's a lot we still have to do to help educators to be ready, right? On the one hand, number one, do we have all the right technologies? Do people still have good access to internet in all the right places and spaces? And the answer to that question is still no. I'm in the United States in the Midwest, and I can tell you there are lots of rural communities still struggling with broadband, and so that's still there. Lots of urban communities still struggling with ongoing access. So those barriers are still there. And then on the other side of it, people are still just kind of crunching the day to day of what they think teaching should look like. Right? We're the people that don't think teaching should look like let's just everybody get a worksheet and a textbook. So as we try to break those barriers, both the technical barriers and the mindset barriers, I think you'll get broader adoption.
And I wanted to add on to
Mhm.
that mindset barrier that he was speaking about. I think the older generation have what I call a mechanical mindset as opposed to a digital mindset. So when they're handed a piece of hardware, it's like the vacuum cleaner that you weren't supposed to break as a child. Where people who grew up in the digital age, in the digital age, we know that it's going to be sleep phone, if not used, is going to be an obsolete phone one day. And so you have a lot of teachers that take their hardware and they lock them away and it's for special use. And their ideas
Yeah.
are around this mechanical idea of technology and not a digital one. And they say, well, it might break. And I say, that's wonderful if it breaks. Then open it up and see what's inside that headset.
Mm-hmm.
And I said that headset's going to be a brick in 2 years. And they go, but costs a lot of money. And I say, so does your phone. And you take it in the bathroom with you. These things are not sacred. They are not sacred. And so really getting the new generation of teachers to come in who are not afraid to always have things out and be fiddling with it, knowing that it can't be broken, knowing that things change constantly. You're really going to see a mindset shift. If Laura in the audience say it doesn't have to do with age, all of this, and it doesn't. There are, like I said, fearless, courageous people in this room of all ages and all backgrounds, but it does take the ability to say, I'm like a 2-year to keep touching that screen until you get the thing you want with your little phone, that kind of awe and wonder. And so I would agree with what he said about mindset. Mindset is what needs to shift. So I think that also.
Yeah. Sure.
Well mentioned. Oh, I had a question from the audience. No, Laurel? No, because I saw you. Oh, where is he? Your hand. Okay. Alrighty. Yeah, and we move to the next question, like, what can be done to help education evolve in its best, to help the educators not to be shy. Um, you mentioned changing the mindset, also the supporting environment with others who can help you, who can show you how to use this technology, etc. Anything else?
My friend Shannon Putnam says we have to have the difficult conversations with our educators, the uncomfortable conversations with our educators. And she says, we've often thought that, we teach a certain way and our students change the way that they learn to fit the way we teach, and we need to kind of flip that. She says we need to change the way we teach to the way people learn, and that's easier to do with this new technology. It's easier to give a wide array of stimulus that speaks specifically to a particular student. But I think, to her point, those are difficult conversations, right? And so who's going to have that difficult conversation with who? Like, to say, I can barely switch from sliding my ATM card to using the chip. Every ATM machine's different. It beeps at me. These things make me feel uncomfortable. Don't do this to me in the classroom too. Having those difficult conversations and saying, it's okay, we're all kind of struggling. I fail constantly. Some things don't work. I'm still a good person. And walking teachers through that experience that can be very uncomfortable for us too. But we're, like I mentioned earlier, we're just a little bit more crazy and we do it anyways. So.
Nicely mentioned. Thank you. Any other ideas?
Yeah, I was gonna say too, like if some there are educators or institutions who don't see a problem with like the way things are going, kind of like she was mentioning, you can't present a new solution for something if someone doesn't see the problem at hand. You kind of have to identify institution or context specific problems, because you don't want to just throw VR at people, right? Like maybe their institution doesn't need VR. Maybe you're just trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist for this specific context. So finding exactly why there's a need for a change and considering more than just VR as an option. Like, we have to be realistic, right? Like, I don't think everything's going to suddenly jump to VR. That might be something along the line, farther along the line. So yeah, finding a specific problem that needs to be addressed, and VR maybe could be one of the ways of addressing it. I would also say too, people don't know what it looks like to learn or to teach in VR. So if you are a person who has conducted lessons, I think a great way is to start like recording what you do and share it. Even if you don't think it's like amazing, it probably is to people who haven't done that before. And that's a good way, because you can say like, okay, just try VR on, try VR. They may say no, but if they can see what it looks like, that's kind of like dropping those like breadcrumbs or something, like make your way. And that might be one way to get people's interest.
Yeah, I think use
Yeah.
cases matter. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No,
Go ahead,
it's okay.
Amara.
I was just going to ask a question along the lines, because there is lots of research out there proving the effectiveness of VR, whether in the ESL classroom or in other subjects. So there are lots of theories, also like constructive theory, experiential learning, and also situated learning theory. And however, one of the things that I feel probably I didn't read much is frameworks that can guide teachers. So some of the frameworks that are out there are SAMR, TPAC, which guide teachers on how to use the integrate technology in the classroom. But do you think that this is enough? I think that VR is unique, that we need innovative pedagogies and frameworks that can guide teachers according to research and learning theories so that they can implement that and have informed decisions in VR.
Yeah, sure.
I agree. That's awesome. That's true. What as you guys are talking, I this is not an education case, but I I know of a family friend who had been going through a bout of dementia. She's an elderly lady and she's starting to lose her memories. And one of the therapies they're using is virtual reality. They've
Mm.
constructed a series of videos and scenes and VR objects, and they have been having her use the VR headset for different things throughout the week, and her memories are slowly coming forward. Right? We don't know how much of it she'll regain, but that's happening, and that's happening right now. Right? And I'm saying that to say that I think use cases matter. If and when we can come up with the kinds of use cases, the kinds that we're talking about here, social use cases, socio-emotional use cases. For example, some of our studies talk about, especially among early learners, if they learn to tell stories, for example, with VR or in VR, the experience can be more immersive. And that immersive experience helps with memory and retention of a story, for example. So again, those kinds of relevant points, what if we're teaching difficult content or difficult stories, story sequencing? Those are things we all have to learn as kids anyways. And if VR is shown that it adds that kind of value, then clearly we could use VR to supplement instruction in that area. So I think those kinds of use cases what matters, and definitely I think new kinds of pedagogies, new kinds of models that speak to the nature of the immersiveness. And it's hard to find the words. We're using words that we created for a different kind of learning context for this one. And the truth is it's kind of not the same, is it? Right? I mean, even as we're here hanging out, I don't know how to tell people, how this feels and what it's like. They have to just put their headsets on and come into the room, right? So I agree. New kinds of pedagogies built on top of the research that's coming in, telling us the kinds of things that VR helps people to do well. I agree.
I
Great
would like
points
to
and
build,
examples.
I would like to build on what he said again. You're just making so many great points, which is we don't have the language for this. Most ed tech theory is built off of what Tom Furness calls gadgetry. It's not actually a new medium that we're learning through ed tech. And VR is a new medium, spatial medium. And so while we can use the language of old ed tech theory and pedagogy, it, just like he said, it's going to be lacking. And so when I go out and I assist people in the field, I say we are making it up as we go along. We are learning more things. We are going to get more out of this experience if we let go of our previous definitions and be open to emergence, because this new medium is going to give us more possibilities instead of us trying to hem it in by the definitions that we have used previously. And so, yes, ed tech has been around for a long time, but not that this is not your mother's ed tech. This is different. And just like he said, the language will fail you. It is not, it will include and transcend the language from before. This new technology is going to include and transcend definitions that we previously used for ed tech. And we need to be open to discovering the new phenomenon, the new paradigms, the new methods, constructs that are going to emerge, and not try to use those old structures to hem in possibilities in the future. Great point.
Yeah,
True.
Nicely said. Thank you.
I think we have two
Mhm.
yeah, two of the audience raising their hand.
Questions.
I think Nicole was first, and then Jay. Mhm. No, I think Jay. Jay, yeah. So Lance, Noel.
All right, let's
Yeah, you can.
Okay,
Yeah.
can you hear me?
there, Jay. There you
Right.
go.
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
great. Thank you. This is so interesting listening to all of this. I really appreciate all the questions and some of the comments about we do have to confront educators with the hard questions. and talk to them both about what they want to do with their students and why they want to get into virtual reality in the first place. The engagement and retention has shown phenomenal results for students and learning in a different way rather than trying to read it from the book. We all know that. The hard part is how do we then engage them in that curriculum and syllabus? And I'm CEO of VEDX, VEDX .io, and that's why we got into this, is to have these conversations with teachers and schools and really understand what's going on. Just went up to a district, a public school district in Washington last week, and just worked with the teachers in training and wanted to, and we deployed an entire classroom, much like Google Classroom or Apple Classroom, but on the Quest, Meta Quest 2, using Manage XR and curated apps and a few apps of our own to help teachers in different subjects deploy what they wanted. And so it's just been extremely rewarding to do that. And I would encourage everybody that wants to have further conversations, and please ask us the hard questions, because at the end of the day, we want to make it easier for educators to step into this, easier to create your own content and record that content and share it with your students. So I really appreciate everybody and the comments and questions here today.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jay. Appreciate that. Now, next up is Nicole. Nicole, you're up.
Hi. Good morning. Thank you. Thank you for this discussion. I guess one of my questions I've been thinking about, I am using VR in the classroom, and I am bringing VR into the new school that I'm at. And I'm very lucky because I'm not facing any pushback or anything like that. I have complete support of the school, and they are in fact going out and buying 8 more Quests this weekend because they know the price is going up on August 1st. So I'm lucky in that situation. One of the things I'm wondering though is that we listen and talk about teachers and not understanding, is that I'm wondering is how do I want to phrase this again? Instead of Okay, let me go back. We all know we have to go through professional developments when we're working, when we're teaching, and this obviously could be part of professional development or onboarding of new teachers to a new class, to a new school. But shouldn't it be something that's built by teachers and possibly shared by teachers? Right? I keep thinking about what I'm doing at my school, and if successful, right, we have a whole training, research, and development department, and I'm meeting with them in a space in a couple weeks so they understand it. And I brought the one person I'm working with specifically on the technology into a space the other day, and her first time, she's super into bringing it into the school but had never used it, and she was blown away by what we were able to do. But shouldn't we be creating this is how you get people into the space versus thinking about letting the hardware companies dictate how teachers would bring it into the space?
Yeah,
If that makes
I
sense. I'm
totally
sorry.
agree.
It's
Yeah,
Saturday
yeah.
morning for me, and I usually sleep in, but I woke up
Well,
early for this.
but one of the things that Starbucks does is it makes sure that their top employees go down and make a cup of coffee every once in a while, right? One of the things, I'm a senior researcher for Virtual World Society, but I spent the last academic year because I do have a background as a teacher, teaching in a classroom. And I taught in a classroom a few years before that. And you're absolutely right. There are some things that if you are not standing in the classroom, you cannot possibly understand. My background in education. And I would say, yes, for the most part, yes. And as teachers, we need to realize that we were trained to believe certain things aren't true. We have to untrain ourselves about the way that we approach the classroom. In order to get through a credential program, you take tests that train you in a way of thinking about the world, in a way of thinking about teaching. So it has to be the bravest like you, the bravest of the brave, to step into a space to say, I'm going to do this a little bit differently with this new technology. And I'm on the ground and I can tell you exactly the ways that I failed and exactly the things that work. So yes, I think that it's a vital a vital component of what we're doing. I recently had this conversation with a man who said there's a lot of people, I don't want to call them posers in this space, but they're hardware and software people that are, they're kind of disingenuous. And I said, oh, Craig, you're so nice, because I call them BS artists. That's what I call them. So if you're feeling like sometimes there are people in the space that maybe don't belong, yeah, there are. And if you think there's some teachers that are maybe doing it really great in the classroom, you amplify their voices as best as you can, because really, if you've never given birth to a baby, you don't know what it feels like. And teaching is like daily labor and delivery of of our lesson plans. So I completely agree with you, and this is one of the forms where we can magnify your voice. I think it's very important.
Well, I'm
Yeah.
hoping that what I'm hoping is that, right, like we're putting together this program at the new school that I'm at now. It's an old school for me, actually. I've just returned to them. Is that we're going to put together this manual of how to onboard it in the classroom, what type of steps you need to go through on the back end to make sure everybody's ready, right? I did that with my old school. I did a parent meeting so they understood what the use was for it. And then we made sure that everybody had steps to onboard. And it was mostly for 2D in alt space because I was teaching younger kids. But now there's a school that's buying the hardware. But writing everything down and be able, and instead of, I know everything's about making money, but instead of, trying to monetize that step, is share it and say, this is what worked for me, and build your own onboarding around this, right?
Yeah,
Because
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
found some resources. I read a great book about VR in the classroom with sample lesson plans. I had to pay for the book.
Yeah.
It,
Um, I mean,
I
that's
all these different things. I do understand that people want to get paid. I get that, but
yeah.
my fear is that if we're not, and this is a group to do it, right? Educators in VR, is that if we're not putting on paper how to get this, if we're successful, how to get this in and sharing it and saying, hey, yeah, I'll meet you in VR, we'll talk about it, because that's what people have done for me. The Heather Dobbs, who did the first VR class for college, she met me in alt space to talk about what I was trying to do without, I didn't have to pay her for her time. She was like, yeah, let's talk. Other people are offering time to meet and talk about what they're doing as well, but nobody's got it written down anywhere that's willing to share it. And I'm wondering if maybe that's the project that.
I encourage you, because that's what we learned to do in our credentialing program, to maybe consider TikTok. So we learned, when I made the comment that yes, we are the ones that need to be the ones creating the curriculum. I also encourage you to look at other mediums than what we were taught in our schools of ed for communicating this really dynamic. I think you would, just from your voice, I can tell that you would do an awesome TikTok. I can tell your passion. I can tell that your heart is pure, because people, we talk about, we don't need to make money because we're teachers and we know we don't make money. And we know we're not going to make money. That's not why we do what we do. But yes, I think that there's a space there for some sort of our biggest resource is each other, and I would encourage you to see to meet with as many people as possible that are deploying in the classroom, and I encourage all of you guys to challenge every single thing you were ever taught in your credentialing program, and and create the new credentialing program for this new medium. And I say
I
your
love
students
that.
are going to tell you the way to communicate the best, and those really crazy people out there, like all of us in this room, will tell you the most creative ways to make things happen. And the most valuable thing you can get is all the stories of how you fail. So I think that's great. And I'm sorry, I think I might have interrupted somebody else maybe on the panel who was going to say something.
Well, I was kind of just going to throw in there that, so I think it's a kind of all of the above in a thoughtful way, right? Because I mean, we've seen this before. What's in my mind as I hear everybody talking is, how one-to-one computers came to our classrooms, right? For a long time, we thought a computer in the hand of every kid is the thing we wanted to see, right? And that dominated our thinking in the 80s, 90s, and we struggled with it. There were private companies trying to get it done. There were nonprofit companies trying to get it done. Ultimately, who got it done? Teachers and Google, right? The Chromebook appended the idea of one-to-one classrooms because they were cheap and teachers could literally go out and buy two Chromebooks themselves and take back to class. And then eventually districts just kind of fell in line and say, well, look, we got to do this because the software is floating around out there and that's what the teachers want. So it has to be a kind of organic process, organic, passionate process like that. But in addition to that, right, we almost need, in addition to a taxonomy of pedagogy, we also need a kind of taxonomy of leadership. Spaces like these doing the work that we're doing, but also figuring out how do we move, in the case of where we are in the United States, how do you move districts forward? Because we want this to scale, right? If it has real worth and real value, we want it to transcend just the motivated. And that's the tricky part, right? So I agree that we want teachers at the forefront. Teachers have to lead, but I think there has to be space for other people too, whether that is business or nonprofit enterprises. The last thing I'll say about that too is you're seeing something else happen, and I'm hopeful for that. What has really stopped teachers from leading in the way of designing? I have this notion, I talk about teachers as designers. Teachers have to become stronger designers of all curriculum, not just VR curriculum, right? But what stopped them is the way in which our scheduling, especially in places like the United States, take up all of teachers' time because design takes work, right? And it takes real kind of engagement. And so with things like, the 4-day school week emerging, I'm hopeful that things like that will free up teacher time so teachers can then do the passionate part of the design work. I think that's really what we need. The schedules need to shift in ways that teachers can carry the curriculum more than they're doing now. And I think it's happening in part because of COVID, in part because we're approaching a new era of, relationship with work. And I think if that happens, you'll see a lot more teachers leading in this effort, right? So I'll stop there. But I think for teachers to lead, there's some structural things that have to shift and some other things that have to shift as well that we have to work for.
These are brilliant. Thank you. All right, thank you, Nicole. We have several other people, and we only have a few minutes left. Is it okay we run over a little bit?
Sure.
Sure.
How many?
Mhm.
Two, three? Is it in the rest? Okay. All right, William.
Yeah,
Thank
sure.
you for your patience. You are up next.
Oops. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Mhm. Hello.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. I just had a simple question. I wondered if anyone in here is teaching financial literacy, financial education, or if anyone is looking to have that included in their curriculum.
I teach mathematics.
If not,
It's
that was
everyday
my only
math.
question.
That's your only question. um,
All right. So,
well, and I guess
we've
that is
got
that for the panel or for
mathematics.
everybody in the room?
That's
Well,
for everyone in
it's
the
for the
room. I'm just
panel.
curious if
Okay.
anyone is doing
Yes,
financial
there are.
education.
Yes, yes, there are. And there's even a new, I don't have it in the top of my head, but there's a new app that's just opened up that is training people on investing on the stock market and stuff that just opened up to be educational.
Do you know the name of it or can you get
Not
it
off
to
the
me?
top of my head. Well, we'll be having them come and present in September, October. So you'll be able to learn more. They just launched it. It's still
All
kind
right.
of in
Thank you.
private beta, but I don't remember it right off the top. Sorry.
Yeah, I've used the
Okay.
junior achievement curriculum over the years and encouraged my students to do it. I did it years ago as a volunteer. They have what
Yes.
I believe is an excellent financial literacy curriculum that I've
And
I've
that would
adopted and
transfer
had my
into
students adopt.
VR. Yeah, that would transfer into VR pretty easily, right?
It would actually. It actually would.
Mm-hmm. It's a
If
great
you tell them,
program.
they'll probably do it.
Yeah. No, we need more of it. That's the truth. We need more. So thank you, William. Excellent. All right, Sandra, you're up.
Thank you. Look, My interest as an educator is primarily in vocational education for adult learners. But I was listening recently to a very interesting interview, actually between Jay, who's here, and from VEDX, and I can't remember his title, but he was a teacher setting up programs at Hoquiam, and something that came up was when he was trying to encourage adoption of virtual reality at Hoquiam was that they got the parents on board. He had a technology open day where they just invited in parents and the students. And I wondered if anybody had had that similar sort of experience to get teachers on board by following their parents and student body.
Yes, I get everybody in VR. So I keep a VR headset on me at all times. And one of the things that we do is if like when I taught is that parent teacher night, I had it ready to go to put the parents and talk to them about the potential jobs. Most of the jobs that'll exist in 10 years haven't even been created yet. And if you think back 10 years ago, there weren't Uber drivers, or there were barely Uber drivers. And so I tell them that the jobs of the future are going to be happening through this new medium. And if they want that for their children, this is an important component of that. More importantly, I show them how medical procedures already use VR, where they practice the medical procedure ahead of time, that their cars are prefabricated in VR, and that even if they will never use it themselves, everything around them will be used. That the cars and the Lion King movie and the procedure at their hospital, that their children can be ahead of the game if they also embrace it. I do this for the teachers, and I also do it for the principals. And the other day, I put my dresser in it too. So yeah, the buy-in comes from the experience. I think somebody on the panel said that earlier. Right? It comes from until you put somebody in, you can't get buy-in. They won't understand it, right? And if you're in a COVID safe area, I suggest you always carry around your headset. But everybody in you can.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Now, the last one we have up is Morning Calm. You're on. Morning Calm. Ba, ba, ba. Do, 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 do. All right, let me try a second time. Okay, now let's try it. Morning Calm. And Kisan, if you had a question, you could jump on. All right. Morning Calm seems to be having some audio issues or something. Sorry about that. Oops, Keith. Can you hit that raise hand button again? It came right on. Nothing like some tech fun. Kisan, you wanna? There you go. Okay. All right. So we're gonna do Kisan first, and then Morning Calm is back, and let's hope that Morning Calm's audio is fixed. All right, Kisan, you're first, and then we'll do Morning Calm again.
Okay, I talk. Can you all hear me? Okay. Thank you very much for your talk. I'm from edtech company in Japan, and one big problem in language learning in Japan, I think, is students' shyness. Kids are too shy to speak from speak English from them. In front of other people. Yes. So could you share your experience or impressions about how can the use of VR affect the students' shyness? Yes, please.
I mean, I can speak from personal experience, really. Like, it's something about like being able to have an avatar instead of yourself. Like, lifts this layer of stress off me personally. Like, I've done video streaming, like panel discussions, and it's just I don't know. It's just something about knowing people can see you directly. When that's removed, you can just kind of focus more on what you're saying. I feel like that just, yeah. And yeah, I have seen students just be able to express themselves, verbally, but also we have these great motivators, these emojis, right? Like that's a really big, has a really big impact because you feel like you're supported by a community, even though someone's not saying anything. But people are also scared to support each other, right? But pressing an emoji is like easy to do, and I think that makes you feel good about what you're saying. And if the avatars look friendly enough too, you you all look very friendly. So it makes you just, those guards come down. Initially, that doesn't you don't immediately realize that. So I think don't expect your learner to just suddenly become a social butterfly when they go in. But I think as they get used to it, they're going to start to see oh, this feels comfortable, feels like I could do.
Great point about the avatar. Would like to throw my 2 cents in. I think the less the avatar looks like you, the more confident you feel speaking. A sausage speaking English is less stressful than a person in a cowboy hat. Believe me.
Yeah, totally.
Thank you.
All right, wonderful.
Well, maybe
All right,
using
thank you.
avatars
Oh,
totally
ahead.
different from. Huh? Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't
Yeah,
interrupt
go
you.
ahead.
You want to finish that? Go ahead. Son?
Okay. What I thought is that maybe using avatars totally different from oneself. Yes. Can have different kind of effects on students' shyness.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think everyone will agree. Absolutely, yes. Yeah, we've seen amazing transformations for people with severe, um, anxieties, shyness, and etc. blossom in VR. It's really beautiful. So, all right, we have. All right, so morning calm. I don't see you on the list. Did you want to give one more try to see if your audio would work? All right, let's see again if we can get some audio. All right, morning calm. Nothing. Okay, so please.
Yes, thank you so much. It was an amazing discussion. So many excellent ideas and tips were covered. I would love to thank all our guest speakers for coming and joining our discussion, for sharing your thoughts and expertise, and thank you and thank our audience for joining our event and participating